Welcome to the new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr. This episode, we're going to talk about the 5 most important questions that I came up with to ask before the upcoming Senior Bowl. The Senior Bowl invites the top talent that is declared for the NFL draft to participate in a week of practice and to play in an annual game to showcase their top skills and top talents. And there's an amazing roster of players that have been invited, not just from the SEC, but outside the SEC. But this is the new SEC podcast, so I got to shout out the top SEC talent. There's a lot of discussion going into this draft of who should be number 1 overall, which player is generational, who is QB2, who's QB3. Is this a deep draft or is this just a draft of some of the best players? And so for this episode, as I mentioned, I came up with 5 really great questions. And I have to talk about some of the best players across the SEC that have been invited to this draft or to the Senior Bowl. When I look at some of these guys, quarterback position-wise, Jaxson Dart's in the house from Ole Miss. Jalen Milroe is going to be in attendance from Alabama. There's a ton of great talent. Really, the defensive line position stands out to me. Shamar Turner from A&M, Shamar Stewart from A&M, Princely Ulamillan from Ole Miss, Trey Amos as well, coming from Ole Miss, DB there. It's a really deep class of players. The running back position, some familiar faces you'll see are going to be Jarquez Hunter from Auburn, Trevor Etienne from Georgia, offensive line-wise from Georgia, Tate Rutledge, right? Got hurt, came back this year. This draft is really deep. Another really big offensive lineman, Emory Jones, coming from LSU, will be in attendance and practicing this week in Mobile, Alabama, and playing football. And so the main position that everyone loves to talk about when it comes to the draft is the quarterback position. And when I look at the Senior Bowl, the question I asked myself was, who is the most NFL-ready quarterback from this game? Outside this game, I believe it's Cam Ward. Cam Ward is not playing in the Senior Bowl. He's also not playing in the East-West Shrine game. Some people would argue Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur is going to be practicing for the East-West Shrine game. It has not been officially announced if he's playing or not. I'm not close to Shedeur, but I know that he will be practicing and he is committed at least to going to the East-West Shrine game. But for the Senior Bowl, which features some of the top talent as mentioned, I would say the most NFL-ready quarterback in this particular practice setting, this field, it's got to be Jaxson Dart. Jaxson Dart, for a lot of people, has been either QB4 or QB3. I've seen a lot of QB4. Mel Kiper had him as QB3 behind Cam Ward and behind Shedeur Sanders. What did Jaxson Dart do last year? Nothing but throw for over 4,000 yards and 20-plus touchdowns. He wasn't asked to do as much running as someone like a Jalen Milroe, but he still has that ability, right? Over 100 carries this past year. Obviously, it helps to have great weapons around you like Trey Harris to throw to. But Dart seems to really improve every single year, and that's kind of what I look at, right? Transferred from USC a couple years ago, had the competition with him and Spencer Sanders after his 1 year playing at Ole Miss, won that comp, balled out 2 seasons ago, and then came into this season with really lofty expectations. Didn't necessarily meet them from a team success perspective, but they won their bowl game at the end. They had some key wins as well, beating Georgia, and he has what I think is just the poise and the uncanny ability to be that guy, to be most NFL ready, right? On the other side is Jalen Milroe. I think why a lot of coaches and scouts like him is that his rushing ability is unmatched from anybody else in the quarterback room that's in this draft class, and from a lot of the running backs as well that's in this draft class, right? It's a super deep running back class, but what he's able to do on the ground as a quarterback cannot be downplayed, right? Where he missed the mark this season was passing, right? And it's not just me being critical. It's the stats will show it. He had 16 passing touchdowns this year, 11 picks. Last year, he had about 5 or 6 interceptions. So he went up in interceptions. He had 23 touchdowns last year, down to 16 touchdowns this year, but he had 20 rushing touchdowns, right? So maybe a lot of those throwing opportunities he had probably were, suffice with rushing the ball in the red zone. But that's definitely an opportunity for him going into the NFL. But I understand why some of these teams have him as QB3, QB4. Second question I had looking into this draft and looking at what we're seeing in the current playoffs for the NFL is, does this draft have a Jayden Daniels? We entered the draft and we were thinking like, okay, Caleb Williams is generational, right? We throw the G word around for everybody every year, it feels like. And, bless his heart, he had a good season. Obviously, the coach turned over in Chicago. He does not had the team success that Jayden Daniels has had. Jayden Daniels has looked calm, cool, collect under pressure. He looks like a veteran out there. He's this year's CJ Stroud when it comes to success. And now he's got his team one game away from going to the Super Bowl. So does this particular game, the Senior Bowl, do they have a Jayden Daniels? I think the simple answer is no, they don't. And I think it comes for two components, right? When I look at this year's Heisman Award race, there was 2 quarterbacks invited. No quarterback won the award. That says a lot about the talent in college football for this particular season. There's a lot of really good quarterbacks. I don't know if there's too many plug and play, start day one, take your team to the last round of the playoffs before the Super Bowl, right? In hindsight's 2020, I would be lying to you if I told you that Jayden Daniels is going to be that guy to do that. I truly believe that Caleb Williams or Michael Penix would have had more success this season than him. I felt like Jayden Daniels was a little undersized. I thought he had really great weapons around him at LSU, but he is proving my overall doubt wrong, right? I thought he'd be good. I did not think he was going to go to the conference championship for the Commanders. And so this particular game for the Senior Bowl features outside the SEC, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, Riley Leonard, the guys in the SEC. When I look at Jaxson Dart and Jalen Milroe, I think they're both guys that need a little bit more development. But I do believe they will be good pros here at some point. And then the last part of that is just the teams that are looking for quarterbacks, right? Raiders, Jets, we'll say the Browns, and we'll say the Titans. I don't know if any of those teams outside of the Jets have the best situation to put you in to be successful. I think the Browns have all the talent on the world. And when it comes to the players, I'm looking at the front office and the business side of it. I don't know if the Browns are a winning organization. The Jets, to me, look like the best setup. You got Breece Hall at running back. You have Garrett Wilson at receiver. We'll see what happens with Devontae Adams. But when it comes to taking a guy from this draft class and this Senior Bowl and having them be, quote unquote, a Jayden Daniels, I don't see it. The next question that I had when I looked at this game was, which player has the best opportunity to raise their stock? And I think I have to go back to the defensive line position. When I was looking at some of my notes for this, this time, the defensive line position is the deepest position in this draft. It's hands down. And then in this game, it's one of the deepest positions. Like, we could just go team to team in the SEC, and just about every team has one or more defensive linemen playing in the Senior Bowl. So if you look at Ole Miss, you got Walter Nolan, who was up for the Outland Trophy Award. You got Princely Umalayan, who was also really good this past season. When we look at South Carolina, they have Kyle Kennard, hit 11.5 sacks this past season. He's going to be here playing in this game. When we look at Kentucky, their defense started off pretty strong. Deion Walker will be participating in this game from Kentucky as well. And Texas A&M is represented with 3 players. They got Nick Scorton, of course, big-time transfer from Purdue, balled out this past season, playing in this game. You got Shamar Turner, you got Shamar Stewart. It's an opportunity for these guys to differentiate and stand out, because now they're all going to be in the same practice field working with these positional coaches and working with scouts. They can show you how they practice rep to rep, how they finish a practice, how they do against all top linemen. Emory Jones will be there offensively from LSU. So I think the big opportunity for players to raise their stock is in that defensive line position. I could also see someone like Trey Amos also raise their stock as well from the defensive back position. The other positions is going to be running back. It's a really deep running back draft as well. Of course, it's going to be headlined by Ashton Genty. Omarion Hampton from North Carolina is looking like RB2. Dylan Sampson, I've seen him as RB4. Dylan Sampson will not be playing in this game. But there's guys like Jarquez Hunter and Trevor Etienne that have that deep value where a team like the Cowboys could look to get them later in the draft. Jarquez Hunter specifically was the 3rd highest rushing leader at Auburn of all time. So he ran for the most yards, the third most in their program history. He's a 4-year guy. He's a guy who didn't transfer. That's the type of guy you want to build a team with. I think that his leadership and his skills will really stand out when in comparison to some of these guys here. So I could see him certainly moving his draft stock up in this one. The fourth question I had when I thought about this particular draft was, which players do you feel like have some of the best pro comps? And a couple guys that stood out to me one was Trey Amos. I feel like from Ole Miss, he gives me poor man's Derek Stingley. Derek Stingley obviously had a really great season. I'm not saying Amos is going to be a first rounder and going to have a season of that nature, 2-3 years into the league. But I like the way he plays at defensive back. Really a pretty shutdown corner guy at 3 interceptions this season. He's someone that I see a little bit of Derek Stingley in. Some of the other guys, when I look about who's playing in this game in terms of comparisons, I really do look at the running back position as mentioned. And Jarquez Hunter, I could see him kind of being a poor man's like J.K. Dobbins, right? He's someone who is going to be a part of the committee system, play a key role like he did for the Chargers this year. He might not be your guy, but he can be a major contributor in this particular draft. And so this will be a really big opportunity for him to move up when it comes to being scouted and being looked at in the Senior Bowl. And I'm excited to see what he can do overall, honestly. The last question I had, and I'm looking at my notes here, was who looks to be a day one starter? I think there's a good amount of day one starters in this draft, and it's not just going to come in the first round. This particular game, the Senior Bowl, year in and year out, produces multiple draft picks, right? You even look last year, there's some of the backup quarterbacks, the Joe Miltons and Spencer Rattlers. They played in this game and they were drafted later in the draft, right? Didn't do a ton, obviously, this season NFL wise, but they were in this draft. Day one starters, most of those defensive linemen talked about earlier, those guys are certainly going to be day one starters. I could see when we look outside the SEC, I'm thinking about guys like Xavier Watts for Notre Dame, who will be participating. He's a day one starter. Ollie Gordon recently just declared for the draft. I could see him being a part of a committee system and getting carries in this draft as well. And so there's so much talent. Maxwell Hairston, this season, his season was cut a little bit short, defensive back from Kentucky. I could see him coming in and being a part of a team's nickel package. He was projected to be a first-round draft pick prior to the season. He's still kind of looking at that mock 1 or 2. And so he's another guy that I could see being a day one starter in this draft that's playing in this game. Outside the SEC, some other guys that are notable that will be in this game. Cam Scatteraboo from Arizona State. We talked about Riley Leonard and Will Howard will also be in this game. Xavier Watts, as mentioned, from Notre Dame will be playing in this game. And so there's a lot of talent, a lot of reason to tune in. And so those are my top 5 questions going into the Senior Bowl that I wanted to have answered. And I'm excited to see the quarterback competitions, the running back competition, some top receiver talent as well. You think about guys like Puka Nacua, if I'm saying his name right. He played in this game a couple years ago, and obviously he's been lighting up the league. And so there's going to be some gems that stand out from it. And so thank you for tuning in. I'm Randall Ledet Jr. This is a new SEC podcast, and until next time.